So this is a pretty interesting story coming out of China, and it has to do with housing in China and a rule that is something that Xi Jinping wants to put in place, but actually has faced a lot of pushback. So he has decided to push it back for, I guess, like a decade now. But it's an interesting one. So here's what the story says. It says China Xi faces resistance to property tax plan. So it says Chinese President Xi Jinping is facing resistance over a nationwide property tax aimed at curbing housing speculation, the Wall Street Journal reported on Tuesday, citing people with knowledge of government deliberations. Earlier this year, Xi assigned to Han Zheng, the most senior of China's four vice premiers, the task of rolling out the levy much more widely, according to the report. However, Beijing is now settling for a limited tax plan because of strong pushback, while a proposal involving state-provided affordable housing is emerging as an alternative. An initial proposal to test run the tax in some 30 cities has been scaled back to around 10, the report said. In an essay in the ruling Communist Party journal Kuishi, published by the official Xinhua news agency on Friday, Xi had called for China to, quote, vigorously and steadily advance legislation for a property tax. China has mulled such a tax for over a decade, but faced resistance from stakeholders, including local governments themselves, who fear it would erode property values or trigger a market sell-off. In internal debates, the feedback to Xi's property tax plan from both the party's elites and its rank-and-file members has been overwhelmingly negative, the Wall Street Journal report said, citing the people familiar with the deliberations. Now, this is fascinating. This is a fascinating story on multiple levels. First of all, one thing you automatically notice is, there's some kind of like decentralization going on here. I learned about in my comparative politics course, looking at the history, recent history of China versus Russia, and how what ended up happening first was there was an attempt in Russia before going fully capitalist. They essentially had decided to make the shift towards democracy first, whereas China decided to make the shift to free market first. Now, they never went to a democracy, really, but that was what they decided to do. But in Russia, the movement was more centralized, where in China, there were these kinds of free market initiatives that were being adopted in certain areas first, and then eventually it was picked up by the central government. So it's interesting to see how there's some of that kind of, decentralization playing a role in this with different localities. And obviously there's going to be rural and there's going to be suburban and urban areas in any country, especially in China. China was very successful at incentivizing more productive rural farming and agriculture, so they had invested in the rural areas. So that's one interesting piece of this. But also another interesting thing of this is the truth that seems to be the case is there seems to be just a gigantic housing bubble in China. From videos I've seen, like many documentaries on the topic, essentially you just have all of these areas, and culturally speaking, I guess it's almost expected for a man to own like one house or maybe even more. And it's just, I guess, the cultural thing there. But the thing is, there's lots and lots of housing that nobody actually lives in. It's essentially ghost towns. But people own these homes. So I guess presumably that would be rising up the price of these places that nobody actually lives in. They don't even rent them out. They're just ghosts. No one even lives there. So it's just part of accruing wealth. Obviously, it increases your net worth. Real estate typically is a really solid investment that you can do. That's why you see so much foreign investment into places like Canada and the U.S. If you go to Canada, there's so much construction going on, and they don't really have that many people. So somebody's buying that up, and it ain't Canadians. And that ends up driving prices up, obviously, speculation. So Xi Jinping is trying to drive down the speculation, I guess maybe for Chinese people to be able to buy homes more affordably is what it looks like. So he's kind of coming into a clash with what seems to be the generally expected culture in China of owning these homes and trying to essentially undercut this really, really inflated home price. And I don't even know where they get their value from. I found that to be a little bit confusing. But when you see how it explains how, there were stakeholders, including local governments themselves. I think the value of it comes from pricing from the government or something like that. I don't know the specific intricate details of how the hell these places even have their value. I don't even know. I didn't understand it. So when it seems like the local governments themselves are like, this is what gives us value. We don't want you to erode our value. This is going to be a bit of a clash going on. And it appears that Xi Jinping is losing this one. I guess people in his elite, the people who are elites in his party and the members and all that, they don't want that bubble to burst, is what it seems like. But it appears that Xi does want it to burst. So it's a pretty interesting one to see, because this is one of the reasons why I believe that China will have a great collapse. One of the big reasons that there's going to be a big collapse in China is because of their one-child policy. They don't have enough young people to support the older people. You need like 2 to 4 workers to support a Social Security retiree. And, they got their big boom from that prime age of like 34 to like 55 or something is considered like a prime worker age. But now that that's gone, the one-child policy means you're not going to have enough people that age to support the now Social Security retirees. So either you're going to have to up the retirement age, or, what are the other options you could do in that situation? I mean, you're just essentially going broke at that point. And that's going to lead to a big economic collapse because the system can't, support it. But another reason why I think China's going to go through a great collapse is because all of that housing is fake. It's not real. There's no real value tethered to that. So eventually, whenever that bubble bursts, that's going to be a huge, huge loss on their part. And then it also seems that Xi Jinping is going insane. Like, he's going full Stalin mode, where, it was more or less, compared to now, it was less hands-on domestically speaking, especially when it came to like social stuff like that. But man, I mean, he is really putting his hand into every single aspect of life in China. I just read a story about how they're now going to start punishing parents for children's bad behavior. They're banning effeminate men from TV. They're trying to push more masculine men. Again, there's that issue of the one-child policy. Obviously now it's a 3-child policy, but it's too late. It's too late for any of that. You can't just 5-6 years ago institute this 2-child policy and then expect all of a sudden for your population to be able to rebound. That's not enough. Nowhere close to enough. Especially considering how many people are in China. That's a lot of retirees to support, and you're not going to have enough people. So, pretty fascinating stuff to see coming out of China. Based on the way that it's going, I don't think that Xi Jinping is going to be able to win this battle. I think he's probably going to lose. He's already lost, mostly. There's too much backlash, and too much of the Chinese wealth and economy is based on those fake houses that nobody actually lives in. I don't know where the fuck they get their value from. But fascinating story coming out of China.